thank you everyone for being here. My name is Mark Moon. I am the director of the Greg and Lisa Smith Global Leadership Scholars Program. And again, a special welcome to Greg Smith from some little company in Bentonville, Arkansas that you might have heard of. He is on the call, and we appreciate his support of our honors program here in the college and his interest in these students. So this is a really interesting session that you'll have today. The seniors that will be presenting to you are senior members of the Greg and Lisa Smith Global Leadership Scholars Program. I wanted to just share with you a little bit about what this program is all about. It's a community of high achieving, highly motivated students across all majors here in the Haslam College of Business. It is the honors program in the Haslam College of Business. And those three words, global leadership and scholars, really means a lot and really defines what we're trying to achieve in this program. So it begins with global. All of these students are admitted to the program in their sophomore year. They spend a semester abroad in London during their sophomore year, living in London, learning about being global citizens, and they all are required to take an international business concentration or collateral. Leadership is an important part of it. There are opportunities for them to learn to really take on that role of servant leaders, and they focus on that. When we select people for the program, we really look for people who have demonstrated interest and capability in leadership, and we help to build those skills throughout their 3 years. And scholars, this is an honors program. These GLS students take very difficult classes, and they take them so that they can challenge themselves to be their best every day. And part of what you're seeing today is kind of the culmination of that scholars piece of it, by virtue of the fact that they are required to do a capstone thesis project at the end of their senior year, or throughout their senior year. So these students that are here today are supply chain majors who are part of the Global Leadership Scholars Program, and they're working on theses in various aspects of supply chain management that they are really excited about sharing with you today. So I think I got one more bullet point there, Lance. So the students again are selected for the program in their sophomore year, and it's a cohort-based program, so they stay in the program throughout all 3 years. So these seniors that we have with us today, they know each other really well because they've been a part of this Global Leadership Scholars Program for the last 3 years. So again, thank you all for being here, listening to their ideas, potentially providing them with some help on their theses. And now I'm going to turn it over to Lance, who's going to be kind of the master of ceremonies here.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I want to reiterate everything that Mark has said about this program. I've had the it's actually honor of working with students. I think this is my third year doing a thesis, helping students with their thesis. And it's a lot of fun and it's energizing. And I think you're going to be really excited about what you see today. One thing about this is they do rely, I mean, I think it says a lot about this program and what we try to stress as a supply chain department, that almost all of our students are doing something that has a very heavy application for what you guys are dealing with. It's timely and a lot of what they're interested in. We encourage them to do something that's fun. And so a lot of them really want to learn about something that is on the cutting edge and is really relevant right now. And so a lot of that does entail talking with people in industry, and sometimes that's hard. So any help, you might think that you don't know enough about whatever the subject is to talk with them, but I would encourage you, if you know anything at all, to reach out, and they can be the one to decide whether, it's something they'd be interested in. But I think you'll enjoy it. And so I'll start transitioning so they have the maximum time to tell you guys about their research. Our first student that's going to talk to you today, actually, I think it has the best advisor in our department, and that's Ashlyn Bowman. So Ashlyn, I'll let you talk about your research.
Of course, I do have the best advisor in the department, Dr. Saunders. So very thankful for Dr. Saunders' help, and I'm really excited to share my thesis topic with you all today. I've been interested in supply chain since my high school days in Alpharetta, Georgia. I had the opportunity to do a mentorship program with UPS in their Atlanta headquarters in order to learn more and shadow their operations and supply chain. And I've always admired how supply chain is constantly problem solving and connecting people despite the borders. So that's why I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and hiked it up here to the University of Tennessee. And I took it a step further to pursue my international aspirations with the Smith Global Leadership Scholars, as Dr. Moon explained earlier. And over the course of college, I've been involved in leadership positions with a few of these organizations here, and I've been able to gain experience with 3 internships. One being with Reuters Events in London, England, where I got to help them with their global supply chain summits and doing research and meeting with executives from Asia to America. And back here in the States, I've interned with International Paper for the past 2 summers in replenishment planning, procurement, and process improvement spaces. I've been very thankful for all these experiences to connect me with the great staff here at UT and keep my curiosity piqued in the classrooms. I found that my passion in supply chain center around improvements for a more visible, ethical, and sustainable flow. And I've realized that when it comes to sustainability efforts in supply chain function, we're going to have the greatest impact with the company, and it gives me a great sense of purpose in my career goals. And that's why I've been so intrigued with my thesis topic after seeing it in commercials, in the classrooms, and conversations with my professors. So recently, there's been this surge in companies committing to being carbon neutral. In fact, 25% of Fortune 500 companies have committed to some type of carbon neutral goal to be achieved by the year 2035. So it's kind of left me wondering if this is even possible. And as we know, it's great in theory, but often left to the supply chain to implement. So as I've taken a deeper dive and currently looking through these commitments, there's been inconsistencies when it comes to the very definition of what carbon neutral is, how we want to measure it, what even to measure in terms of scope, and how communicating these goals to their supply chain. For example, Apple has promoted that they have achieved carbon neutrality by using 100% renewable electricity sources at their stores, data centers, and corporate offices, but this is excluding their operations. While on the other hand, you have a company like Amazon who's measuring their carbon footprint to include emissions from Amazon operated and third-party freight, Amazon branded products, their use, packaging, customer trips, and other purchased goods. And they're using a metric of carbon intensity on an annual basis. So the goal is I want to understand the common themes and common discrepancies in these goals, and I plan to analyze carbon neutrality plans each company has set forth to identify these, but I could also use your help in understanding the challenges and misconceptions. So I'm hoping as I move forward in my research to understand the things I've mentioned before with the approach and measures, but also get a deeper understanding of the benefits of pursuing this commitment and where the supply chain foresees challenges or obstacles that could arise in the flow, so we can better prepare and plan for these goals in the future with the supply chain perspective in mind. So I would be happy to take any questions and look forward to working on this further.
All right. If I see any questions, I'll bring those up. If you have any questions, feel free just to put them in the chat, or you can mute yourself if you'd like. So Ashlyn, while they're thinking about any questions they might have, I guess I have one I could ask you, which is, we've done a lot of talking about these goals as you started diving into these reports. And I think you've seen a lot of similarities, but are there any things that you've noticed that maybe we don't think about? I look at how's an Amazon going to pull this off? And there's probably the things that we think about that are kind of the easy things. But what are some of the things like you've seen that we might not think about, but a lot of companies are using as a lever for carbon neutrality?
Right. So I've seen in a lot of maybe plan versus reality for the companies who have achieved it. And something I never really thought about before was the carbon trade market. So for example, Apple has sponsored carbon offset projects, but they don't really provide on what that looks like. But they said it's to offset carbon emissions of their employees' commute. And another company would be Shaw Industries. They used carbon neutrality by purchasing renewable energy credits and carbon credits to offset their emissions. So that's something I'm hoping to take a deeper look into, as it's maybe not necessarily part of the plan, but it becomes the reality.
Okay, great. So if you have any questions, I think we're going to have rooms for the students that you can actually go ask them any questions or talk about their research. So just to keep us on track, Ashlyn, thanks for talking about yours, and we'll transition now to Madison, who's going to has a medical supply chain research she's going to talk to you about.
Hey everyone, my name is Madison Hutson. First, just thank you all so much for your time. This is really valuable to us as students to get feedback and help moving forward. So truly, thank you so much for being here. So I, like the other, senior supply chain major with a minor in sustainability and a concentration in international business. And so with the privilege of the Smith GLS program, we've had that international experience. That's really where I got to play on that international business concentration. So my first internship was actually when I was a marketing major and switched my junior year to supply chain. I'm very thankful for that switch. I love supply chain. But my first internship was with GDR Creative Intelligence, which is a kind of boutique marketing consulting firm. And then when I returned home, I interned at Tractor Supply Company as a national marketing intern. And so that's where I got my first exposure to supply chain, because Tractor Supply has a really robust supply chain department. So I got to work closely with them, ended up making that switch to supply chain. And then most recently finished an internship at Holly Frontier Corporation in Dallas, Texas. And shockingly, it did not get canceled or moved virtual. So I got to move to Dallas this past summer, and I worked on their supply chain team as a procurement intern. That's really where I fell in love with procurement, and am hoping to continue that into my career. And last week, I actually accepted a job at Dell Technologies in Austin as a logistics analyst on the procurement team. So I'm excited to continue that passion for procurement moving forward. And like everyone else here, I'm a proud supply chain nerd. I love being as busy as possible on campus and as many activities and clubs as possible. So you can kind of see that there through my involvement in CSCMP and Nexus. And then also a cool kind of face-to-face student interaction. I get to serve on the student conduct board, as well as some campus ministry opportunities. So for my thesis project, much of my inspiration for this really came from my underlying passion. So you can see here, it's about end-to-end pharmaceutical distribution. So just to give a little preface on how I came to be interested in medicine. So I began college at the University of Tennessee as a nursing major. I quickly found out that I pass out when I see blood. So I switched my major to marketing and now supply chain, but I really have such a passion for human health and medicine. So I wanted to take advantage of this thesis freedom and dedicate my research to this area. So as you can see, kind of the Venn diagram on the right, I'm looking to combine my minor of sustainability, my major of supply chain, and my passion for medicine and healthcare. So with that, through my preliminary literature review, I kind of realized that there's a gap in research right now, and that gap consists of a lack of information surrounding the disposal methods for unused and expired pharmaceutical drugs. So with my thesis, I'm looking to focus on the reverse supply chain and logistics for these drugs. So with that, I'm having to determine where the responsibility currently lies. Is it the customers? Is it the pharmacies, the manufacturers? I'm having to look at other disposal methods. You know, if people flush them down the toilet, it could prove to have environmental harm. If people keep them in the cabinets, if they're unused, they could end up in the wrong hands. So there's just dangers involved. So I'm really figuring out opportunities and the responsibility on how to close the loop here. And so as I begin this research process, I'm starting with a survey that I'm going to send out. I'm working through the IRB, which is kind of the research board here. So currently I have my survey questions, and you can kind of see on that screenshot on the right, just a glimpse of what some of those questions will look like. And you can see that I'm trying to really identify the responsibility and then the opportunities currently to be had, aka what is lacking in these disposal methods. So this is where I want to ask for help of anyone here. So I'm currently looking to set up 30-minute interviews with supply chain or distribution professionals. It would be a bonus to talk to someone within healthcare or medicine, but really anyone who could speak to the reverse logistics process and how to obtain and assume responsibility for that. So I currently have 3 interviews set up with Bristol Myers, with Eli Lilly and Company, and Merck, but to have 2 more could really pose a great benefit for my thesis work. So definitely want to make that known if anyone has, as a student, I really don't have any knowledge of this area. So even if you don't think you have much knowledge, it's a wealth more than what I would have. So if anyone has additional information or could provide some insight here, that would be greatly appreciated.
Hey, Madison, maybe just a recommendation or a thought is obviously you've got the manufacturers, but McKesson plays a very big role in distribution. And you think about the Walgreens, the Worlds, and CVS's and everything else, who are actually the ones that ultimately distribute. Maybe beneficial to bring the intermediate and the final stages into research as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely good advice. I got to speak with someone from McKesson back in August as preparation for this work. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
My question is, isn't there a lot of bloodletting that happens in supply chain?
A lot of what?
Bloodletting that happens in supply chain. You left nursing because you couldn't stand the sight of blood. I think you'll probably see some in supply chain.
Yeah, but maybe it's a little bit less than marketing.
So Madison, one thing that I was interested in is you talked about you're trying to figure out where the responsibility should lie in terms of disposal, but have you seen just in kind of your initial research where it currently lies in terms of disposal of unused drugs? Like, are there any common themes you kind of seen? Is it customers, pharmacies, manufacturers, or is it just kind of, it depends?
Yeah, definitely. So you see it's very often people are wanting to take the responsibility off their shoulders and throw them onto someone else. So currently it's the customer's responsibility to figure out how they should properly dispose of their unused drugs. But the challenge with that is that if you ask just pretty much any random person, they're not going to know what the proper disposal methods, they're not going to know what programs and initiatives are in place to dispose of these drugs properly. So that responsibility is really thrown onto the customers, and certainly not making blanket statements here, but you see typically with the manufacturers, they provide opportunities for proper disposal through third parties. So it's not them saying, we support this disposal method, but they say, check out this website for the best disposal method and what's healthy. So it's really left up to the customer right now.
And you actually got a question in the chat, which is there any legal precedent that governs disposal ownership?
There are definitely kind of laws and guidelines around what is allowed or not allowed, because what you see is most people are thinking they can return drugs through a kind of incentive program so that they can be reused into the system. But once a drug is out of the pharmacy, it cannot be administered to someone else. So really all the laws and guidelines in place are about kind of reforming those drugs, which cannot happen for health reasons. So in terms of returning them for disposal, there really aren't many methods in place because it's kind of an untapped area.
Awesome. So you've done nursing, marketing, supply chain. It sounds like you might have a career in law too, if the supply chain doesn't work.
I think I'm going to stick with supply chain.
Okay, I think that's a good choice. So thank you. And again, if you want to talk to Madison, she'll be in a room later. It's a really interesting topic, and I think really relevant right now. So thanks, Madison. And we'll transition to Michael, who's going to talk to you guys about his research.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Michael McKell. I'm a supply chain management senior at UT. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, but I was originally born in Egypt and immigrated to the United States, but grew up here, so consider myself an American. In terms of my work experience, I entered for the British Parliament while studying abroad in London. which was a unique experience, especially during Brexit. But also entered at CAT on their global logistics procurement team. And this summer, I was at ExxonMobil working on their data analytics team for procurement. Currently, I am on the Food Supply Chain Coalition, doing work for the Big Orange Pantry, kind of like setting up an inventory system and an online order form as well. For after graduation, I'm still going through the job process. It's been fun and looking forward to where I end up. In addition to the Smith Global Leadership Scholars Program, I'm also a Scholar of Distinction, the Vice President of CCMP, and the VP for the Food Recovery Network. And I'm very passionate about diversity. So I'm an advocate for the Diversity Advancement Program and a tutor and a peer mentor because I enjoy helping others as well. So for my thesis, I will be writing a case study about data governance. So this idea came from one of my internship experience where I had to work on a project to improve supplier data quality and manage data enrichment as well. So I decided to stay with this topic because I really enjoyed working with data and it was something that just interested me. And just, I'm a very analytical person. So like looking at data was something that I enjoyed, but also with the emergence of big data, data governance is more important than ever. So you have companies need complete and accurate data to make important decisions, but also for analytics and so forth. So for my case study, first I'm conducting research about big data and its importance and kind of the challenges that corporations face with big data. And that research will be used as my introduction for the case study. But next I'll write a background and from a point of view where a student is stepping into an internship and has to do a data governance project. And then the background from there, I will write a problem setting and kind of the purpose of the data governance project given to the student. And with the data governance project, there will come data and I'll have to create replicated data that contains kind of quality issues that you see in the corporate world where there is either incomplete or inaccurate data. And then from there, the replicated data will be used to create an assignment that students can be able to complete in the case. And some of these approaches include kind of giving them data elements and they have to analyze it themselves and see what are ways that they could improve it and kind of ways to analyze the quality of the data. And lastly is the key learnings. And this will focus on kind of what do you want people to get out of my case study. And some of these are data is not perfect, even at billion-dollar corporations. Going into my internships, I always thought that data is like clean, organized, and up to date, but that's actually rarely the case. But other key learnings I want to explore is potential reasons why data isn't as good as we expect and investigate ways that companies can actually better their data. So another way to look at my thesis is kind of through this diagram. So as I mentioned, the idea came from my internship. And then from there, the problem statement and replicated data will create the case itself. And then from the case, I will create teaching notes and teaching plans so people can know how to teach my case study. And my goal is for the case to be twofold. So on one side, it is actually research on big data and data governance. But on the other hand, I want to be able to use the case to show students what a successful internship looks like and presenting it in a context of a case study. I also want to use my internship experience and make it scalable and relatable so other supply chain students could have a learning opportunity as well. And I would love for companies to engage with my case study by just providing feedback after I finish and kind of their perspective about if there's anything better I could do as well. So I'm really excited to continue working on it and see where my research takes me and kind of the outcome of the case study itself. So thank you for your time.
All right, Michael, thank you so much. So when I look at your research, I mean, this is not, data governance is not something companies care about at all, is it? It's a very relevant topic. It sounds really interesting. So I guess when I look through it, a couple questions. So is there anything that you need in terms of, do you need to talk to people or anything like that that would be helpful? And then you talked about some of your key learnings. How do you think the methods, how are you going to figure out what those key learnings are as you go through this? Because you're going to have a lot of stuff that is going to come. How are you going to take those and create kind of these lower level key learnings that are going to come about?
Yeah, so for the first question in terms of research and kind of companies, I would love to get like companies' feedback and perspective about my research and see if that's actually what they experience in their own corporations. I feel like every corporation is different on how they manage their data, but also, yeah, just feedback about the case itself and kind of through the, because it's twofold. One is research, the other one is like an internship like experience, and see does that actually reflect how they provide internship experiences for students. In terms of the second question about research and kind of the key learnings, for me, the key learnings will primarily come through kind of the research and see what corporations and what other research has said about the challenges that corporations face with big data and how they, for example, if they utilize different systems or processes, and kind of that will kind of go through and answer why isn't as data as good as we expect, but also from the student's perspective through the assignment as well, kind of see what they learned from the case, and we want to include that as well. And maybe they might provide a new perspective that the research might not give. So like primarily through research and from students as well, and then if companies, from companies and their perspective when they read the case.
Awesome. So you have a couple comments. One is from, if I'd have known Wendy Tate was on here, I could have asked this question for her without her typing it because I could have guessed it. But she wants to know, are you going to try to publish your teaching case anywhere?
I haven't like thought like that far in advance, but I'm currently working with Dr. Willems, and once we finish the case, I'll ask him about that and see if we'll try to publish it.
Awesome. And so, and Thomas has said, and I think this was a comment for everyone, and is, great job with all you guys capturing the actions to be taken at the end. Don't stop at what the current state is, but make a similar recommendation for next steps. And it sounds like what you're doing with the key learnings, which I applaud you on. And I will say, one of the, being an advisor for several of these, that is one thing that Mark Moon stresses, is he wants that application, which I think is a great outcome of almost all of these. Mary Long wants to know, she really likes the internship angle and the impact of students. Do you intend to survey students to understand what the key challenges they have seen in their internships are?
Yeah, so after I kind of write the study itself and kind of do the assignment, from there, that will like surveying students will see their perspective about is that what my internship experience was? Is that something that they experienced as well, or was it something different?
Awesome. All right, so thank you, Michael. So again, he'll be in a room at the end if you guys are interested in his research. He'd really appreciate the help on feedback about data governance. So now we'll transition to Drake Oberholzer, and you've already got my attention, Drake, because you interned at a brewery. So take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So I am Drake Oberholzer. I just want to start off talking a little bit about my internship experience. Like Dr. Saunders said, through the Smith GLS program, I actually interned at a brewery in London called Ansbach & Hobday. My main project there is I created a beer kind of from ideation and took it all the way through from production, sourcing the materials to production to delivery to being there at the launch. So it was, obviously a smaller scale, but I kind of got to see a little mini supply chain and be involved in almost every aspect. So that was really impactful for me. And then afterwards, I came back that summer and interned with SAIC, working in their subcontract department, helping contractors get set up through a new procurement portal. And last summer, I interned with General Motors for one of their future autonomous vehicle programs and purchasing. And I actually accepted a full-time offer back from General Motors. It's a 2-year rotational global purchasing supply chain program. So I'll be able to get experience in supply chain, logistics, and purchasing up in Warren, Michigan. So I'm really excited about that. I'm from Jackson, Tennessee, and a couple of things I'm involved with on campus. I'm the CMO of our chapter of CSCMP. I have been in the men's choir before, not this year. So I have a guitar back here, so I guess have a little bit of musical ability. But yeah, really excited to be here and thank all of you for your time. And so for my actual case study, like I mentioned before, this kind of arose through my internship last summer with General Motors. We were really focused on securing contracts at competitive prices early in the program's life. So the program I was working on hadn't been started yet, and we were still in the process of sourcing commodities and figuring out which suppliers we were going to select. And my role was more along cost modeling than negotiations with suppliers. And so we would look at things like, for rubber gaskets, what are the cost drivers? Just depending on what the commodity we were looking at, I had to identify different cost drivers and also take into account supplier location, facility size, basically anything that could impact the cost structure of whatever commodity we were sourcing for this future vehicle program. And I wanted to do a case study because my end angle on this is I want to show students what a successful internship could look like at a great company. And I thought I'd be able to get a lot more collaboration and engagement with a case study than going the route of a regular thesis research paper. And so part of my angle with that is I want to write this case from an undergraduate intern point of view, rather than most of the case studies we look at from Harvard or Darden or something. They're all almost from a consultant or someone that goes in and already knows everything. And so I wanted to kind of come at it from an angle that I think undergrad students could relate to more. And kind of by doing that, I think it's a great way for sponsoring companies to be able to clearly communicate, what are the right actions for interns to take? What do you want to see from interns or from your employees, and vice versa? It's a good way to introduce students to a company before the fall job fair, before the before the interview process, and give them an idea of what exciting projects you could be working on. And so right now, I'm still in the process of figuring out if I want the end result, the key learnings, to be more of the students will be identifying the cost drivers, identifying the general framework for understanding what drives costs, or if I want it to be more quantitative and I'll be building like a semi-robust cost modeling framework and looking for more quantitative answers from the students. But my main goal is to get this in front of students and hopefully drive engagement and get them focused on correct behaviors and get them to learn more about cost modeling at the end of the day.
Thank you so much, Drake. So that sounds, I'm going to guess that you're going to have a lot of companies that are interested in what students think a successful internship is. So I would encourage them to talk to you. One question I had was, when I'm in a class, I have a couple things I can do to, for lack of a better term, nudge students to participate, right? Namely, the grade I assign them. Because you don't have that kind of lever at your disposal, how are you going to try to nudge maybe students to participate and get the things you want to out of this case study? Because obviously the more participation you get, the more complete learnings you're going to get and more interesting learnings, I think. So how do you think you can nudge some to maybe participate?
Yeah, so I think probably the key thing for me is getting the teaching note really right and understanding, these are the specific ways we can, because like when you write a case study, you want a level of ambiguity in it, right? Because you want students to have the freedom to, come up with their own answers and be innovative. But at the same time, with this goal, we want to drive students towards making the correct decisions and showing them like this is a great behavior to have in your internship, and this is what companies are looking for. So I think the key with that is getting the teaching note right, and basically just making sure that whenever the case is delivered, a couple of key behaviors and key skills are being highlighted. But leaving enough of it up to the student to where hopefully they'll come up with other great learnings and great insights that maybe me or anybody else I work with on the case didn't think of.
Awesome. And you got a comment from Wendy Tate, and this makes sense because this is an Arizona State organization, but she is excited, one, to see your interest in purchasing, but two, she said to take a look at the CAPS research and ISMs. And I don't know if you're in 421 right now. Well, you know, our that's our purchasing class. So I think, you know, this would fit in there. So I'd encourage you to talk to them, her maybe about that. If there's any other questions for Drake. All right, great. That's really interesting, Drake. And if I knew that I could intern at a brewery, I might go back to school and do this program. So we'll transition now to Spencer, who is wants to talk to you guys about another procurement project. I see Wendy Tates has been on all of our students because we have a lot of procurement here. So Spencer's going to talk to you about his research.
Thank you, Dr. Saunders. So hey, everyone. My name is Spencer Stry, and I'm a senior majoring in supply chain, just like everyone else, with a minor in statistics. And I've had a few internships as well. I worked for Fortnum & Mason when I was in London. I worked as a planning and merchandising intern there. And then the summer following that, I worked at Colgate-Palmolive in manufacturing. And then I worked at this past spring, I worked at a startup in Knoxville called ReviewBox. I did customer analytics there. And then this past summer, I worked for Microsoft in operations, and I'm actually going to be working there full time out in Reno, Nevada. And so my photo there on the left-hand side is when I was at Lake Tahoe. I'm really glad that I was able to visit last October. And I'm from Franklin, Tennessee, and I'm really lucky to have found UT. I moved to Tennessee my senior year of high school from Virginia, and that really put supply chain on the map for me. And so I'm so glad that I was able to find this major and find something that I'm super passionate about at UT. And in terms of campus involvement, I'm the president of our Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals group. I'm super excited to be helping students with that, as well as something that I'm proud of is being a teaching assistant for incoming freshmen taking business classes. And then a notable award for me, actually a few of the other GLS members in this call, we were participating in a case competition just last week, and we ended up winning that. And so I'm super happy about that. And then just going right into my thesis, I'm going to be talking about indirect procurement. And I came up with this topic because I was talking with one of my friends about their internship, and they were working on tail spend, which is a side of indirect procurement, which is around the bottom 20% of spending for indirect purchases. And they were just talking about how it's really not managed that effectively and how there's a ton of room for opportunity. And so when it came time for me to start thinking of thesis ideas, I started to research indirect procurement a little more as a whole and found that this topic really isn't addressed that much and is not researched that well, and it's often overlooked. And the reason for that is because indirect procurement is focused on non-revenue generating expenses. So this might be like travel, IT, ad agency, temporary labor, just any expenditure that doesn't relate directly to the product or service being sold. And then this contrasts to direct procurement, which really focuses more on that revenue generating expenditures. So if we take an auto manufacturer, all the parts that go into making that automobile, that would be the direct procurement. And so that's why that gets so much more focus. And companies are always trying to come up with ways to reduce spending, especially with COVID as well. And so indirect procurement is a great way to find value for organizations. And I've already been talking to a few indirect procurement professionals, and I've found a ton of opportunities for savings in almost every, I've been talking to them, and they've been saying that there's opportunities for savings in almost every single contract. Here, Lance, if you could go to the previous slide for a second. Sorry, I'm taking a minute on this. And just indirect procurement is so important because it takes up such a large volume of the actual purchases at a firm. And so you can improve not only cost savings, but also time savings with improving that transit buying process. And you're able to find it. The total spend varies industry to industry, but there's huge room for opportunity. By looking at a specific category of spend, you can often find double-digit savings. And so really, really important there. And then just a few of the challenges why indirect procurement is so difficult to manage. There's low average spend, and there's a lot of a lot of low volume purchases. And so if a indirect procurement organization only has a limit of over $100,000, like that's when they start to look at it. There's all of that, all of the purchases underneath that are all left on the table and they can be analyzed. And you need a lot more visibility in order to try to improve that spend as well. And also just top-down leadership support isn't always there for indirect procurement because the savings aren't realized back into the procurement org or the supply chain org. They're realized back into the specific business unit. And so it's really hard to see how these savings are accounted for, but there's a few different ways like cost avoidance, cost reduction, and value enablement that can really show the value of indirect procurement. And so going straight into the next slide, I really want to have an applied thesis with a lot of different industries because they all have different indirect procurement organizations and different spending levels. And so if you're not affiliated with indirect procurement directly, if you know any of your colleagues or anyone that would love to be involved with this, I would be more than happy to help work with them. I want to do some informational interviews and really take a look, potentially get a sector of spending within your organization and just be able to do a spend analysis on that and try to come up with spending or savings goals and come up with future improvements for indirect spend management. And so that's a little bit about my thesis, and I really encourage you and hope that you want to get involved with me.
Awesome. Thanks, Spencer. So as they're typing questions in, I know this is a really important area for a lot of companies because almost all companies at least manage some type of indirect spending, right? Have you seen any kind of common methods that companies use or kind of best practices already in your research that companies are using to manage indirect procurement spend?
Yeah, absolutely. So one main issue with indirect procurement is the visibility. So a lot of companies don't even have visibility into where the spending is occurring. And so having more transparent spending using P cards, trying to group spending across business units. So if marketing and another org within the business all buy the same specific good, trying to group that spending across the business units to take advantage of volume pricing is one way. Doing e-auctions to have some bidding for the indirect spend. Those are all great ways. And then I guess one last thing that I was researching as well, I found zero-based budgeting, and this can really help align incentives with top-down leadership, procurement, and the business units. And so I've definitely been taking a look at that as well.
Awesome. I think it goes back to the old adage I know you probably heard in class. That's step one, which is, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So it sounds like that's step one for a lot of these companies. So thanks, Spencer. And again, he'll be in a breakout room and get done. And last, but definitely not least, we have Jessica Thomas, who's going to talk to you about her research in supplier diversity.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Thomas. I am originally from Jellicoe, Tennessee, which is just an hour north of Knoxville. And I originally came to UT wanting to study supply chain for a couple of reasons. Actually, in high school, I took a class, and there I learned about procurement and just how supply chain can impact the environment and impact economies and stuff like that. And so that's really what got me interested in supply chain. And I also wanted to expand my breadth of knowledge within supply chain by having different experiences throughout college. So I had several internships. The first one was in sales and marketing with a cocoa company. That was a startup kind of business. So that was really fun getting to see all the insights in that. And then in London, I worked for dunnhumby, which is the analytics branch of the Tesco and Kroger company. And so there I did customer analytics. And then most recently, I've had 2 internships with PepsiCo, where I had a planning role in Chicago and a warehousing role in Indianapolis. And I'm really excited to be joining them in Chicago again next year. And then in terms of campus involvement, I am the Nexus president. And for those of you who are not familiar with Nexus, we are committed to empowering women in supply chain through a number of events and networking. I'm also a member of Scholars of Distinction and the Diversity Advancement Program within the college. So onto my thesis, kind of like what I mentioned before, I was originally interested in supply chain because of the procurement aspect of it. So I wanted to do some research in that. And I was specifically interested in what actions companies could take to impact underrepresented communities And in my research, that kind of led me to the idea of cluster communities. And by cluster communities, I mean an economic community which specializes in making a certain product. So in these communities, they have shared resources, whether that's through knowledge or equipment to make a certain product. So in my thesis, I want to show how sourcing from these communities can create shared value and benefit both the company and the supplier, and then at the end, impact economic sustainability long-term and improve the quality and quantity of their products. So that is the first half of my research. And then the second half will be looking at how we can combine this sourcing strategy with supplier diversity programs. And I think that this is a super timely topic, especially after the summer, as many companies pledged or created supplier diversity programs in response to the racial unrest in the country. So I know a lot of programs pledged to donate a certain or supply from a certain percentage of minority or women-owned businesses. So when I looked more into these programs, the how of the program is often very vague. And so what I want to do with the research is to see what practices are already being done and how sourcing from cluster communities could impact the supplier diversity programs. So onto the methodology. So how can you all get involved? So the first part of my research will be conducting a survey, and this is actually going to be done with the ASEC Supplier Diversity and Economic Inclusion research that is being done within the department. And so this is going to be shared with the forum partners. So please keep an eye out for this email, and please take the survey to help us understand if you have a supplier diversity program or not. This will help us just to see what is being done. And then after analyzing this data, I'll be following up with interviews to get more insight on cluster communities and just sourcing habits, which could impact your supplier diversity program. So if this is something that you're interested in, please contact me. My email is in the PowerPoint if you're interested. And now I will leave it for any questions.
Thank you, Jessica. One thing that I was thinking about as you went through this, because you were talking about procurement, is obviously, this is an important topic that has a lot of visibility right now. But, when you think about sustainability, we always think about, the three tiers of social, environmental, and financial. And I think the best programs are the ones you get those synergies between some of them. So have you been able to see some of the, financial ROI that maybe some of these supplier diversity programs actually provide to get that type of synergy?
Yeah, for sure. I think that changing your sourcing habits and showing that you're interested in economic sustainability, that makes a huge difference, especially as our culture starts to shift and starts to care more about ethical sourcing. I think that's something that's going to greatly impact companies. But also, I think it also makes for better supply chains because you have these really strong supplier relationships, and you also have better quality of products out of that. And so I think that it will help in the long run.
Awesome. And so I could have also guessed this. Wendy Tate is excited about your topic and has some questions. And so I do want to give you guys time to get into the rooms. But I'll end with one of her questions, which is, do you think it will take a different set of competencies for people in procurement in the future in terms of moving these type of programs forward? Is it going to take a different set of competencies than maybe the processes we currently have in place?
Yeah, I think so. Especially like I mentioned before, a lot of these programs are very vague from what I could find. And so I think that anything can really help. Having a certain set of, guidelines that a company can follow will end up making a really big impact.
And I think we'll probably get to that as we go through so I think Hannah probably has, with no more questions, Hannah probably has a couple housekeeping items, but right here, we're going to have rooms that you can talk to all the students, and here is their contact information, reminder what their topic was also, if you're interested. And again, you don't have to be the person that is, the expert on this. I can tell you that they would love to talk to you if you can even, point them in the right direction, or just give them some kind of high level, this is my experience in this area, even though I maybe don't deal with this every day, because they're wanting to learn more about this. And the more people they talk to, the more they can kind of triangulate those learnings that they all talked about. So please, don't think that you're not enough of an expert. I can guarantee you that you are. So with that, I will hand it back to Hannah to kind of point you guys in the right direction, how to talk to the students.
All right, thank you all so much for joining us. Couple of announcements. Tomorrow we will have our last mega session of the Supply Chain Forum. Greg Smith here with us is going to be giving our keynote on the future of supply chain, and we're so excited to have him here with us today, and definitely excited to hear him speak tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we'll have our final session of the Supply Chain Forum, which is blockchain in supply chain, ROI or RIP. And that'll be with Dr. Randy Bradley and Alan Amling, two of our great faculty members here at UT. So hopefully you all can make it to that. What I'm going to do now is open up breakout rooms. So each of you will be able to select which room you want to go to. They'll be labeled by our students' names and their topics, and you can move around between rooms. Hopefully, we'd love for you to take advantage of this time with our students to ask them any follow-up questions and maybe help them get connected with you or somebody in your organization who might want to get involved with their thesis projects. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now.